Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you can do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now. Wave them around. That's right.
Hello. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast, the show where we look at geek culture through the Spyglass of Faith. My name is Matthew Seipel Anderson, and I am happy to be here talking at you again about nerdy stuff that we all love. Well, this episode is going to be about Alita Battle Angel, and I have to say that I love this movie. I fell in love with it. I was very charmed. It got mixed reviews by the professional critics, but I don't know, an armchair critic like me, I really enjoyed it. It was fresh, it was far out, and I think it really succeeded where some movies failed. But before we get into all that, I think it's time for some science. Today's science segment comes from ScienceNews.com. The article by Emily Conover is titled "Microwaved Grapes Make Fireballs, and Scientists Now Know Why." Here's a recipe for homemade plasma. Cut a grape in half, leaving the two sections connected at one end by the grape's thin skin. Heat the fruit in a microwave for a few seconds, then, boom, from the grape erupts a small plasma fireball, a hot mixture of electrons and electronically charged atoms, or ions. I just feel like after this podcast goes live, there's going to be a college dorm somewhere that's going to have a fireball shooting out of a microwave. If that ever happens, I do not claim responsibility. Don't try this at home, kids, although it sounds kind of awesome. The article continues, "This trick has been floating on the internet for decades, and previous explanations of the effect have focused on the importance of the connecting skin. But two whole grapes bumped up against one another do the same thing, as do similarly sized waterlogged beads called hydrogels." So there are scientists that actually brought this question to a lab, apparently, and tried to figure this out. It looks like there was a report in the March 5 proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and a scientific team determined that the grapes act as resonators for the microwave radiation, much like a flute resonates with sound waves. A single grape is just the right size that the electromagnetic waves get trapped within the fruit, bouncing back and forth. Using thermal imaging, the researchers showed that a hot spot appears in the grape's center as the result of the trapped radiation. But if two grapes sit next to each other, that hot spot forms where the grapes touch, and the salts within the grape skin are ionized and released, producing a plasma flare. The effect makes for a spectacular kitchen fireworks display, but one that you may not want to try at home. It could damage your microwave. So, I have a feeling that maybe the fireball in the college dorm room actually happened in the past life of these research scientists. And I don't know, man. Maybe they had a slow week, and they're like, dude, let's blow up some grapes in a microwave and get paid for it and write a paper about it. I don't know, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to know why. And there you go. There's some science for you. Well, let's get down to business and talk about Alita Battle Angel. Like I said, I was really taken with this movie. I enjoyed it a great deal. It was fresh. It was out there. And I think Alita succeeded with some things that some other movie franchises have failed at. Here's the two things I have in mind particularly. First off, I remember reading a while ago, and of course I can't remember my source, but I remember reading that DC wanted to avoid Marvel-style humor, which makes sense. They want to create their own world. They want to create their own brand, their own feel. And so they just thought, all that slapstick, goofy, kind of junior high humor, we're not going to do that. That's not our thing. That's Marvel's thing. And so, that's cool. But I think as we've seen, that the DC universe has really fallen flat, and they've must have gotten rid of that approach because Aquaman has a lot of that style humor. They're really borrowing, you could say stealing a little bit from Thor and bringing in some of that silliness into their world. And Aquaman made a ton of money, a boatload of money, if you don't mind the water reference. And so, DC backed off that. But I thought that Alita Battle Angel pulled off maybe what DC wanted to pull off. Alita did not have the goofball humor that Marvel did. They had the light moments in that movie were the relationship moments, the love interest moments. There were some really cute, maybe chuckle-worthy moments as the Alita character is developing, but it wasn't the, completely ridiculous off-the-wall stuff that Marvel is doing. So Alita really had its own theme or its own style, its own vibe that did not have that humor, but it totally worked, and I loved it. The next thing was that Alita gave us a really nice father-daughter relationship with Dr. Ito, and I think that's what, I don't know if I can speak for all of the fandom, but that's what I wanted out of the last Star Wars installment. I wanted there to be the father-daughter dynamic between Rey and Luke, and it wasn't there as much as I hoped it was. In fact, there's a scene in the deleted scenes from the last Star Wars of, one of the times where Luke shuts out Rey, and he closes the door, and he sits down on his bed, and he actually breaks down. And I thought Mark Hamill just did a great job in that scene. It's just the kind of a gut-wrenching cry. I really liked that scene, and I wish it would have made it just because it made Luke Skywalker seem less like just a grumpy old cynic. And it was like, it just showed that he had made this stand to leave the Jedi Order, and he was sticking to it, even though it was just killing him on the inside, because he has that heart to go and be a teacher. Now, of course, if it had made it into the movie, the haters would have hated it and would have, ripped on it and whatever, but I wish it had been there, but it wasn't. But anyway, Alita, on the other hand, has this great father-daughter thing, and their relationship develops. There's kind of a coming-of-age teenage thing where they butt heads, but ultimately it turns into this really nice, supportive kind of a father helping his daughter spread her wings and fly. And so as the movie progresses, you really fall in love with these characters and with their relationship. And so when Dr. Ito is injured, you're like, oh no, Dad's hurt. Or when Alita's in danger, you really feel it because you see her as somebody's daughter, and how deeply he cares about her. So real quick, I'm going to go through a quick pro and con list. I don't want to spend too much time on this episode because I want to also crank out an episode on Captain Marvel this month, Lord willing. So here we go. Pro. It was fresh. Like I said, I've used that word 3 times so far, but it was. I was dying to learn everything about this new world. I didn't know anything about it. You get plopped right in the middle of it, and everything was new. It wasn't one of these old franchises that's been around. It wasn't a Trek or a Star Wars or a Marvel or a DC. It was really new to me. I didn't read the manga, and so I loved how just brand new it was. Again, kind of going off that, just the world building. There's Mars. There's the floating city of Salem. There's the mysterious war, which is called the Fall. And all this stuff has happened, and all these different things are involved in this world. And it just was, it was cool, and I loved it. And there was a lot of things in this movie that were very over the top, very big. And that was one of my complaints about Aquaman, is that it was so ridiculously big. This movie, however, built this brand new world where everything was big and weird and futuristic and zany, and all the robots and the cybernetics, and it was so far in the future that all that stuff worked because it was part of a world. Whereas Aquaman, it's like this dude with tattoos in our day and age, and then all of a sudden the Power Rangers show up on the beach. So it was different. This movie, all the big, crazy, zany, weird, it just worked for me. I just enjoyed it. I sat back and I just loved it. Again, the father-daughter thing, which I've definitely touched on. I have 2 daughters now, and I just related to that especially well. Of course, you have to mention the action and the effects. It's obviously top-notch. James Cameron was involved, which he's the Avatar guy. It just was fun to watch. Some reviewers, I think, have said that some of the story got lost in the effects and the action. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think so. It just was cool. It was a thrill ride. I loved it. And last, the ending, because it sets up for sequels, which I really, 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 really hope they make, because I want to see more of this world, definitely. I don't know if it made enough money to justify a sequel, but we shall see. All right, quickly, cons. Doc Ito was a little unbelievable as a hunter-warrior. I'm trying to keep this review a little spoiler-free. Hunter-warrior is just not going to go into it. But he still had a pretty gnarly, huge axe that had a like a propulsion device to make it. I don't know. It was cool. He had a cool weapon. Motorball plays a role. Motorball is a little cheesy, but again, it's part of this over-the-top futuristic world. I just thought it was fun, and I enjoyed it. It is a little cheesy. My advice, if you watch this movie, just allow yourself to enjoy it. Probably my biggest problem with this movie was the storyline took a few jumps in order to make the movie concise. It wouldn't really justify breaking it into 2 movies, so I understand why they made the choices they did. Like one example, and this won't spoil anything, like I said at the beginning of the film, there's the father-daughter thing. The father's obviously very protective of Alita and doesn't want her to fight, and he wants to protect her. But then later in the movie, there's sort of this jump where all of a sudden he's like, yeah, I'm cool with you playing motorball. Go ahead. I know it's a deadly sport, but good luck in there, kiddo. It just seemed like a weird jump to me, but kind of a nitpicky thing. The other con is the character Hugo, which is the love interest. Now, overall, he was fine. His character was fine. The actor was fine. There were a few cheesy lines, and because something about his look and something about some of the lines that he had reminded me of Anakin from the Clone Wars. So I had to kind of just allow myself to put up with that. That was kind of tough. And also, I feel like the actor was a little too baby-faced for me to take him seriously, because his character is someone who basically jumps people with cybernetics and steals their parts. He's part of this sort of street gang. And he's just a little too much of a pretty boy. I mean, they threw a black leather jacket on him, but that wasn't enough. They should have at least given him a cool scar or something, But again, that would have ruined the pretty face. So overall, really enjoyed the film and would highly recommend it to anyone if you're looking for something fresh and fun to check out. So, okay, now it's time, of course, to
Bring forth the telescope!
Well, this is the show where we look at geek culture through the spyglass of faith. I would say that a theme of the movie Alita is resurrection. Alita essentially arrives on the scene in our film here, dead, but she's raised to life by her father. And if you know anything about Christianity, resurrection is a huge theme in Christianity. In fact, Jesus taught about it in John chapter 3. He said, "As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Now, Jesus is referring to a story in the Old Testament where the people were being bit by serpents, and so Moses was instructed by God to make this bronze serpent, and when the people would look at it, he'd hold it up they would be cured. It's kind of a wacky story, but Jesus grabs onto this and says, this is a picture of what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the cross and pay the price for mankind's sin, and whoever looks at me and believes in me to forgive their sin because of the cross, that person will have eternal life, and I'll come into their life. And then, of course, it says, God so loved the world that he gave his Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. You know, there's also a picture of that in this movie as Alita and her father's relationship grows. Eventually, Alita's father comes to accept her identity as a warrior. And I hope this doesn't spoil too much, but in the beginning of the movie, she has one style of body, and in the end of the movie, she has another one that's so much more powerful. It's almost like a second picture of resurrection in the movie. And, that's a picture of Jesus. Jesus came like the lamb in a humble form as a baby and as a man. And he goes to the cross, pays the ultimate price, goes to the tomb, is risen from the dead, and now he has immortality and offers life to all who believe. And in fact, the resurrection is one of the most powerful clues and proofs, you could say. If you listen to my last episode, clue might be a better word, but it's one of the most powerful things about Christianity, because the disciples go from these cowardly wimps who are hiding out to being bold as a lion and tough and taking on the whole world and giving their life for the message of Jesus and for the message of the resurrection. So it's an awesome thing, and great picture of it here in the movie Alita Battle Angel. All right, I'm going to sign off and just call that good. This has been a pretty quick recording, but I need to just crank them out. Stan Lee famously said, I don't have inspiration. I have ideas and deadlines, and so you just got to get things done. So, all right, take care. Have a good one. Love you. Bye-bye.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you can do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now. Wave them around, that's right. Woo!